Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. I'm Silas North, a former forester and volunteer rescuer, and winter makes the rules for us now. I keep the log, fix what breaks, and stand the night shift when the wind scrapes the pines. The cabin sits a quarter-mile off a drifted road on the upper peninsula, and the gate stays closed unless a voice checks in clean. I count fuel, I count steps, and I write the time before I move. Before the word infected left the screen and crossed the tree line, I knew this place by smell and weight, and that knowing still helps. Snow stacks on the rail, hinges freeze, and sound carries farther than it should. So we talk soft, we move slow, and we do what we said we would. This is the first week the bells felt wrong and the quiet under the trees turned thin. I checked the latch and kept lights off. The second bell rang once, not loud, just off. I marked the time, breathed steady, and held the line. Somewhere beyond the drift, a shape tested wire and didn't choose a direction. I waited for the next sound because winter answers slow, and then all at once, tonight. The road to the cabin disappears under windpack by December, and then miles stop mattering and step counts take over. Snow stacks in the cut like poured salt. I park at the turnoff, haul a sled the last quarter mile, and let the quiet rise and fall the way cold air does when it has room. Red pine and spruce shoulder the roofline, patient and still. Mornings begin the same way. I run a finger along the inside pane to judge frost, note the stove's draw, and put battery and water in the log with the same dull pencil. No brands in the book, only what works and what fails. Heat holds if the wood is clean and ash stays low. Power stays honest if the pulls are small, and water stays safe when it is treated like it owes nothing. The road below looks more like a field every week, which helps because the infected do not love chest-high powder. They move, but they move badly, and snow tells the truth about what came by in the dark. Tracks get checked after sunup, slow and patient, with more care for direction than totals. If a line drifts in from the highway and leans toward sound, it goes in the book and the day bends around it. If wind erases a trail, wind can keep it secret. The gate is a farm panel on heavy posts with a bar and a buried catch. It opens easy inward and fights outward, useful when hands go numb and heads get busy. A bell line crosses the approach at knee height and touches a brass chime on the porch rail. Lights live on switches, not sensors, because false alarms cost more than they pay. I keep the rifle cased behind the bench and the pump shotgun racked by the door, and neither leaves its place without reason. Tools go first, axe and saw, a coil of cord, a pry bar for frozen latches. The log records when a weapon comes out and why, because memory edits at night and stories try to change shape. If something scares me, I write that down too. By late morning, work moves outside if the sky allows. Paths from the porch to the gate get cleared, young pine gets shaken free, and brush pulls back from the fence where weight could work a wire loose. The fence is tall enough to steer, not to stop. The trick is guiding feet, not trusting a wall to think for you. A gap on the north edge looks like neglect and funnels pressure into open ground. Afternoons are for checks. Hinges take oil, bolts snug down, and glass gets brushed so ice stays out. I walk the line with a lamp in my pocket, not on my head, and a whistle at my collar because breath can fail when cold steals it. Rushing breaks ankles and gear, and broken anything in winter writes the next 3 days. The radio sits on the desk by the window and stays low. Bands get scanned at set hours. Short notes go in the log, and the promise is the same. Hear what can be heard and pass what can be passed. If someone wants the gate, the questions stay the same. Names, time, condition, distance, and waiting happens behind the marker rock where light can see without pulling anyone closer. That first week carried a different hum, the kind that makes a person tighten the same bolt twice without knowing why. The latch took another quarter turn, the bell line got reset, and the hour mark gained one word: listen. Afternoon brought a single set of prints across the lower road that stopped at the pines. Not mine. Not neat. Back inside, the time went down. A sketch went beside it. One bell rang after dark when the wind shifted, and the night held. Morning came glass clear and brittle. The prints had drifted but still leaned wrong when they entered the trees, like balance had left the body. I stayed on open ground and kept my voice low. Sarah said the north path was quiet, and I told her to hold the gate dark and keep counting. Tools got staged, latches checked, and the shed door swung easy on its hinge. Nothing moved where it should not move, and that went in the book too. People ask why stay when infected crowded every conversation. Leaving also costs, and this place was already paid for with time and work. Trees and snow and honest tools make sense when nothing else does, and a cabin you can maintain beats a road you cannot trust. Water warmed, keys hung on the same nail, and the day felt ordinary again. Second morning went flat white, the kind that hides distance. Tracks on the lower road showed melt at the center where something warmer than air had pressed, then lost the line and staggered. No chase followed. Open ground favors the watcher. The fence got its daily walk. The tower took a glance for rime, and no glaze showed yet, though the cold was ripening toward it. Work turned to wood and water, two things winter respects. I split around, widened the path a shovel's width, and checked the culvert for ice bells that fool ears at night. Sarah said the west trees were shedding lightly, and I asked her to clear the eaves and keep the downspouts breathing. By afternoon, the kettle had done its laps, and the log carried neat rows of times and small decisions. Evening closed with one more pass along the tape at knee height, the line to crawl if lamps fail. I hung gloves to dry, set boots on the rack above the stove, and gave the latch that last check that helps sleep arrive. Beyond the drift, the road stayed undecided. The same winter question waited on the sill. What breaks next, and how do you keep it from breaking you with it? Local radio stopped drifting and started hitting hard. The hosts said surge, then outbreak, then played music. I kept the set low and wrote the times because hours matter when the ground moves. Once a week, I drove to the co-op, traded cuts for dry goods, and talked snow with the clerk. That ended fast. I took one last run before the road closed. The lot looked wrong. 2 doors hung open, receipts tumbled along the curb, and a cardboard sign read "Closed for cleaning." I filled 2 cans from the gravity feed and didn't look inside. On the hill back, the trees went still the way storms do before they choose. I parked at the turnoff, hauled the sled, and let the cold sting me awake. Next morning, a governor's clip repeated on bands that never carried it. Stay home, limit travel, report symptoms. I wrote the lines and taped them by the door, then added one for us. Here first, step second. I pulled the truck battery, logged fuel, and hung the keys where I wouldn't forget. Roads sell courage they can't deliver once snow takes them. Symptoms on the radio sounded like a cold, until they didn't. The list shifted from fever to behavior, standing, staring, wrong movement. And that was not any cold I knew. I let the stove run low and watched light slide off the spruce tops. Hold routine and watch the fence, I said, and then I did both. I stopped going to town the day after that. There was food and water enough, and anything past that felt like a reason to cross lines I couldn't uncross. Midday, I tied orange cloth on the marker rock, a signal for anyone who knew how to approach. It said, "Announce early, wait in the light, keep distance until cleared." At dusk, a truck rolled slow on the buried highway and coughed twice, then turned south. The engine note echoed under the trees. I let the bells stay quiet. Later, someone walked 10 paces up the track and stopped when the drift pressed back. I wrote the time and waited until spindrift filled their prints. An amateur net broke up all afternoon. Emergency rooms full, then closed. A small hospital gone dark. A volunteer said a patient sat up and stared at a corner until a nurse placed the body back on the bed. It sounded like a story told too late to help. I turned the volume down and listened to cadence instead of words. By evening, I burned half the laminated cards for work visits and saved the rest for what still mattered. Culvert, antenna, spring intake. I mended a glove and taped the last seam on the east storm window. "Keep it small, keep it repeatable," I said, and made a list for morning with 4 lines: fence, water, radio, food. 2 days later, the co-op called the net and said the lot was empty and the door chained. The clerk asked if anyone needed insulin for a child, and 3 voices answered at once and then broke apart. She said she was sorry and went silent. I wrote her name in the margin so I would not forget who tried when it mattered. The word infected arrived tucked inside an advisory about county roads. The language was soft, the facts were not. Nocturnal wanderers, unprovoked approaches, non-responsive to speech, slow persistence. I stood by the porch rail and watched a crow work a bone at the tree line. The bell line brushed the chime once in a wind that wasn't there. I tightened the knot. The line hummed and held. Headphones stayed in a drawer after that. Letting the room hear what I heard made me notice how the noise changed me. At the relay window, I kept my voice even. "Cabin North, standing by, power stable, water safe," I said, and I asked for relay only, not rescue. A voice in Houghton repeated my words. 3rd day of clear cold. A siren rose beyond the ridge and strangled to a low drone that went on too long. The sound had nothing to bounce from, so it flattened. I set the kettle to click, stepped out with the shovel and knocked ice off fence staples. The road beyond the drift looked smooth enough to skate. By dusk, I fixed what was mine to fix. I lowered the antenna a notch to stop a sway, retensioned the bell line, and brushed the stovepipe so I wouldn't wake to smoke. In the log, I wrote the date and the same 6 words. "We are small, but still here." Then I sat by the door with the light off and listened to quiet that means work is coming, and the only question was whether it would knock first. The day I stopped pretending the gate would be enough, I hung a sign where the plow berm used to be. White board, black letters, simple rules. Announce early, wait at the rock, follow instructions, quarantine first. A sign buys seconds, and seconds keep plans honest. Snow built shelves along the rails. I dragged brush from corners to thin climb points, then set 2 low stakes inside the approach to trip a boot before it reached the bar. Nothing sharp, nothing cruel. Just a reminder that feet decide faster than hands when fear arrives. I raised the bell line by a palm so drift wouldn't ring it for sport. Inside, tools went where the hand reaches first. Pry bar by the door, saw teeth oiled, wedges in a bucket. I keep a rope looped for stuck latches and panicked pulls. The rifle remains cased. The shotgun sits where I can reach it without waving it. On the desk, I wrote a script for anyone at the gate. Names, hands visible, stop at the rock, how long together. Then the terms, 3 days apart, masks when we speak, food through the box, water from clean jugs only. Routine survives what panic ruins. Light went thin and wind carried sparkle off drifts. I checked the lock and set a lantern low where it couldn't flash through glass. Sarah said the west path looked clean, and I told her to warm her hands and keep the stove low. After dark, a shape paused by the marker rock. Head down, arms close, no light. The bells stayed quiet because snow had piled against the lowest run. I watched from the upper window. The face held an unfocused stillness. The body leaned, waited, leaned again. No call for help. It stepped once, found the bell line with a knee, and the chime spoke a single flat note. Sarah said the tree line was still, and I said, hold the door and keep quiet. Fingers were bare and slow. The left arm lagged the right. Breath clouded, then didn't. Boots untied. I asked for names, nothing. The shape tilted too far and righted itself with a stiff step. I marked the time and uncased the rifle. 20 paces in summer become more in drift. I set the stock where it always sits and aimed low and steady. The shot cracked the night and the body folded like a jacket dropped from a hook. Snow swallowed the echo. I waited. Sarah said the woods held, and I told her to stay inside while I checked the line. Mask on, gloves on, rope slung, shovel in hand. I tested a shoulder with the shovel blade, no response, then kept distance and dragged the weight by the belt. Work no one wants. I handled it the same way after because repeating a clean process keeps the mind from writing a worse story. I burned what should be burned far from the fence, not out of anger, but because fabric carries what you don't see. Wind at my back, rope long, shovel between me and hands that didn't know what they were. When the ground allowed, I buried. When it didn't, I marked and returned. Times went in the log. Back inside, I wrote one line. First infected at the gate, no speech, slow approach, neutralized. Nights like that draw a clean line between what you allow near the door and what you push away. Morning held quiet until something broke it. Far off, an engine ran hard, cut, then coughed back to life. I stood on the porch and counted. The note climbed the valley and drifted west. Tracks at the lower road showed a skid, a stop, and a turn. I added to the board, ring once and wait. No exceptions. People who need help can follow simple steps. People who can't may not be people anymore. At noon, the relay carried a voice from Marquette. Clinic shut. Volunteers in a tent by the lake. Lake effect all week. Plows stalled. Sarah said the eaves were icing, and I asked her to keep them clear. We'd leave the gate dark and let the bells speak for us. By late day, clouds stacked and the wind laid the pines flat. A bowed wire hummed by the south post. I wedged it back and tapped the wood until the ring sounded true. I shut the radio, tested the latch, and let the house go quiet. That night, the bells rang twice. 2 notes. I took the shotgun, set my back to the door, and watched the line through glass. 2 figures stood at the rock, hoods up. They didn't wave. They didn't call. The left one swayed, the right one leaned toward the porch. "Stop at the rock and say your names," I said, and the left one made a sound that wasn't language. The right one turned its head too far toward me. Sarah asked if she should bring the pass-through box, and I said leave it by the door and keep the room dark. I asked her to count to 30 and listen for a third bell. The figures stepped without looking down. The line caught both at the knees. The bell chimed once, then again as the right one stumbled and reached with stiff hands. I warned them to stop. Nothing. I braced, let breath out, and fired once. The second shape kept coming. I cycled and fired again. No reply from the trees, no echo of boots, no voices breaking. Steam rose, faded. I wrote the time and the count and put the shotgun back where it lives. Cleanup ran longer in the cold. I roped both by the belts and hauled them off the approach. I worked quiet and steady while wind carried sound away. After I stood at the rail and watched the dark. Snow slid in thin sheets and erased my tracks. Sarah said she heard 2 notes, and I said that meant no one else had found the line. Next day I added what the gate needed, but pride had delayed. A second bar and a wedge you kick into place without looking. Not heavy, not pretty, but it bought seconds. I moved the floodlights off motion and onto a knee-high switch so a hand finds it even when the head shakes. Light carries farther than we want, so we keep it brief and low. By week's end, the rules fit. The sign at the berm held, the bells spoke when they should, and the fence guided instead of boasting. The rifle stayed cased unless it didn't. The shotgun lived by the door, and tools did the work most days. I wrote clean times and left space at the end of the page for what night might say. The first infected taught the lesson early and clear. The next would arrive harder because winter teaches that way here. I felt it in wind losing interest in the treetops and in birds that stopped arguing at dawn. I held to the list, checked the latch, and waited for the bell to ring and a voice to answer, or nothing to, and a sharper rule to write. The sky held before sunrise. The tower on the ridge is a rusted frame that still does one job. It holds a line above the trees. The trail up is a slow climb through crust that rings in the morning and collapses by noon, and I take it when the sky looks honest. A beacon only helps if it starts when you say and stops when you promise, so the routine wraps around that. I strapped a small panel and a coil to the sled, kept the shovel close, and walked the switchbacks. Pines creaked. At the base, I brushed rime from the lower brace and tightened what my gloves could reach. No heroics. Winter punishes reach. Back at the desk, I wrote the window and the words that wouldn't change. Ridge relay, cabin north on the half-hour. Location broad, status stable, quarantine required, food not offered. Water on request at the marker rock. Sarah said it sounded stiff, and I said clear saves time. A beacon draws need and trouble both. We run modest power by day and lower at night, enough to cross the hills without shouting. The loop stays the same: identity, rules, window. Rules stay simple because fear eats memory. Announce early if you can. Stop at the rock where the light reaches. Hands visible. Masks if you have them. I ask how long you've stayed together, what hurts, and whether anyone touched blood or spit in the last day. The pass-through box sits at the drive, a crate with a slot and a lid that locks on our side. Food goes out sealed, water labeled, and instructions laminated so panic can't smudge them. People who follow steps while tired often help later. I moved the floodlights off motion and onto a knee-high switch so a hand can find it without thought. Bells stay, one at the road, one at the gate, because a single tone says enough. The fence is for steering, not stopping, and the gap on the north edge funnels pressure into open ground. At noon, the net settled in. A voice from Baraga counted batteries. Another from Iron River said the clinic closed at dusk. I logged times and drew a thumb map. Mid-afternoon brought a call that mattered. A woman checked in on a handheld, breath tight, words steady. She said she was on a ridge east of the highway with a teenager and an older man, and they had kept clear of everyone for 3 days. They could see smoke from our stovepipe. I asked her to describe the cut north of us and the rock beside it. She did it right. I read the quarantine terms in the tone I use for weather. 3 days apart. Talk through glass. Food and water through the box. Masks when we speak. Hands off what we hand back. We would not open the gate until we could promise the house we were safe. Sarah said the shed would work if we aired the cots and checked the small heater. I asked her to stage blankets, a bin for gear, a timer for the vent, and a card with the schedule taped to the window. Light went thin. I kept the shotgun near, not up, and stood where the fence and rock line up. The radio crackled on the half-hour. "Ridge East standing," the woman said, then gave the names. I told them to wait for full dark, move to the marker, and hold until we spoke from the porch. Night carries sound too far here. I left lights off, checked the latch, and felt for ice under the mat. The bell at the road rang once. 3 shapes stood in the cut, not close, not moving wrong. Hands visible. "Stop at the rock," I said, and I asked Sarah to slide the box with a jug and a folded note. We did not bring them in. I told them to sleep behind the marker where the windbreak is strongest, to keep still and to wait for morning. Sarah logged the time and names while I watched the fence. The night stayed clean. Once something moved in the trees and left. Once a fox tripped the lower line and the bell spoke soft. Dawn came gray and hard. I set water to warm, took the box to the rock, and spoke through the scarf. "We're starting the 72 hours now. No touching, talk through the pain. Food, then water, then checks." The older man nodded. The teenager watched the snow. The woman asked if we would still be on the band at noon. I said yes. They followed the fence to the shed without stepping into drift. I watched them place their gear in the bin and stand back. Sarah said she'd handle tea and oatmeal, and I asked her to write what they ate. By midday, the beacon had done 2 windows. A voice from Houghton repeated our status and added advice. "Keep broadcasts short, stagger windows, reduce power at dusk." I trimmed the loop and lowered the dial. At last light, I wrote the list: fence, water, radio, food, and the extra line long days demand. Patience. The tower hummed above the ridge, the bell hung still, and snow started to climb the steps. In the shed, the heater ticked and someone murmured words that sounded like hope. I kept the gate closed and the promises small. Snow came light at first, and the ridge kept our beacon steady long enough to plan. The woman on the east hill checked in on the half-hour, breath even, words short. She said the older man had a calf cut from a fall, and the teenager was steady. I logged the time, drew a route, and marked wind so drift would not choose for us. The plan stayed simple. Meet at the marker rock by midday, keep distance, move as one back before dark. I packed the sled with blankets, tea, 2 sealed jugs, clean cloth, and a small kit to cover a wound without pretending to treat it. The rifle stayed cased. The shotgun remained by the door. Tools went in a canvas roll where a cold hand finds them. Sarah said to bring a spare scarf, and I nodded, asked her to hold the beacon low and to log any voice between our windows. I set the latch, pulled my hood tight, and took the birch line that keeps you off the false flat. The sled kept pace. The East Hill shows early if you ride the power cut, so I took the long switch that lets you see trouble before it chooses you. Halfway up, I brushed snow off my hood and listened again. They waited at the marker, not the gate. The woman lifted a hand. The teenager mirrored it. The older man sat with his leg straight and his boot off. I kept 10 paces and set the sled between us. "We'll speak from here," I said, and she said that was fine. Questions came in order. Names, how long together, any close coughs, any blood on skin. She answered, 3 days as a group, no contact. One figure seen at dawn walking west through birch. I told them the shed would be their room for 3 days, that rules do not bend, and that food and water come through the box. The teenager stared at the small flame. The older man pulled back his own wrap. The cut ran clean, edges closed without stitches. "Stream water and a clean shirt," he said, and I told him we would dress it and keep it dry. Tea steamed. The girl took careful sips. Wind lifted across the ridge and carried a thin echo of our bell. I looked to the tree line and back. "We move now," I said, and the woman said she would take the rope. Teen in the middle, older man behind. The route home used higher ground and a drift corridor that slows anything that doesn't lift its feet. We stayed to the right of the birch stand and watched birds for tells. A jay cut across and vanished into spruce. Snow fell straight for once. I kept eyes wide and steps small and listened for wrong breath. Halfway home, a figure rose from scrub west of us, not fast, not close, but set on the sled's hiss. I raised a hand and the line stopped. "Hold still," I said, and the woman said she understood and told the teenager to breathe through her nose. The figure turned toward the pause, lost balance in a deeper drift, and dropped to its knees. We let the hill do the rest. The teenager said her toes tingled, and I said we would change the order and put her behind me until the feeling came back. She nodded and didn't waste steps. At the last rise, the fence showed as a darker line, and relief turned into work again. At the marker rock, I stopped them and laid the steps out clean. "From here, you walk to the shed, put your bags in the bin, step back, wait for us to close the lid. Then food through the slot," I said, and the woman thanked me without moving closer. I slid a jug and 2 bowls through and kept my glove between us and the box. Sarah said the shed was warm and the vent was pulling, and I asked her to log intake. Names, times, food, and the window thermometer. She read the numbers back and would check again at dusk. The older man's face eased after stew. They stepped through the routine without strain. I stood outside the window and read the rules again. 3 days minimum. Talk through glass. Swap bins for trash. We don't open the gate, I said. And the teenager smiled and said the glass made her feel safe. I told her that was the point. I walked the fence before dusk and found the lower bell heavy with crust. The knot deadened the tone, so it came up a handspan and spoke clean again. The sky turned pewter. I checked the north gap, pushed a brush pile back, and ran a glove over the post where the wire hums. Inside, the log took a fresh page. I wrote names, ages in one line, steady on approach, followed rules, no signs. Sarah said the kettle still had heat, and I said to keep it low and save fuel. She set an alarm for the midnight walk, and I told her to wake me if the girl coughed or the older man couldn't sleep. Full dark came early. I stood by the porch rail and watched for shared movement, the kind that means plotting or panic. The shed light made a dull coin behind frost. Clouds broke enough to show a thin moon. I let the house go quiet and listened to breath and bell. I ended the day with tomorrow's list where dawn would find it. Check the cut for tracks, check the culvert for ice, dry gear for 3, beacon window at noon. The bells held, the gate held. Snow started again and erased more than it left. I slept light, ready to hear if the night would test the plan we had made. The wind backed off and the trees held still for once. I marked the hour in the log before sleeping, lightly. Morning wrote the first line for them: sleep, heat, food, no contact. I kept the window cracked to talk without echo, and the rules card sat where a tired eye could land. The woman wrote their names with a steady hand. She said Lena Hart, the teenager, was Marley Quinn, and the older man was Gus Alder, a neighbor who stayed until his roof began to bow. I logged the names and kept my voice even. Lena said 3 days was fine, and I told her we would check temperature at dawn and dusk, track rest, and watch the cut on the hour. Marley asked if she could help from inside, and I said inventory through glass would do, count what they had and what they needed, and we would trade sealed for sealed. Breakfast stayed plain. Oats tea, a jar of beans. I slid bowls through, stepped back, and watched hands as much as faces. Gus ate slow. Lena checked his bandage like someone who had done this before. By noon, the shed looked like a room again. I set a clock card on the pane with half hours marked. Marley wrote a list on her side of the glass: 2 cups, 2 spoons, 2 blankets, a book. And I told her we had all 4. Snow thickened and drift packed the fence line. I shoveled a loop round the shed and kept the path clear. Sarah said the radio window was clean, and I asked her to lower power and clip the loop because short is kinder when people listen for hope and get rules instead. The second night ran cold. Frost climbed the window, the heater ticked, and wind stepped sideways through the birch. I watched the fence without a light. A fox shook powder from the wire and trotted off. On the third morning, the rule ended. Temperatures normal, no cough, eyes clear. I put keys in my pocket, opened the gate slow, and asked them to bring only what could be wiped. Lena nodded, Marley tucked her gloves, and Gus stood and tested his leg. We kept distance inside and set places where paths cross least. Marley took the small room off the hall, Lena the couch that hides a bed, Gus the chair by the window. Sarah said welcome behind her scarf, and I said we would walk the line and show the marks that matter. Tour first, chores second. The fence guides, the bell speaks, the gate is a tool, not a test. I pointed to the floodlight switch we barely use. Night stays dark unless we choose light. Marley traced the crawl tape and asked if it helps, and I said if your light fails, your hands do not. Rolls took shape fast. Lena owned the kit and wrote small panes before they grew. Marley liked lists, so I gave her the pantry and the drawer of batteries. Gus watched edges and walked the line. The perimeter needed a quiet mind and a stick. After lunch, we set signals on paper so new hands could learn. 1 tap stop, 2 move, 3 backtrack, and never say names on the open mic. Lena said clear is kind. Marley made a water chart. I told her we pasteurize gentle to save fuel, time marked, initials small. Evening brought shared work. We split 1 round, stacked the same way, left a lane for boots. I showed Marley how to dry gloves above the stove without scorching them. Sarah knocked a small cornice from the eaves and called that the west side would need a rake. Night checks rotate. I took the early, Sarah the late. The bell did not ring. The wind laid down and held its breath. Morning came bright and cold. Marley counted the pantry and tapped the pane when a count felt wrong, and I said pull the row and we would check seals. Lena wrote a note to change bandage at noon, and I said I would stand outside and talk while she worked. By midday, they were not guests. They were weight that holds a roof. I handed out a card with alarm signals, a flashlight each, and the habit we repeat until it owns us. Put the tool back where the hand expects. Lena said homes run on that rule even without bells, and I said that is how we keep this one ours. Then the plan showed the seam every plan hides. A voice walked the band and asked for the gate, words clear, timing right, the kind that gets good people to move faster than they should. And I told Sarah to hold power low and wait for my mark because the right answer in winter is usually wait, then act, then write down why. We held the line. The beacon did its job, and then what beacons do. It drew voices we could not help. A miner wanted salt. A teacher counted blankets. A pair said their stove coughed smoke, and then the line died. I logged time so paper could hold what we couldn't fix. Keep it boring, I said, and Lena said boring keeps people alive. We kept the loop tight. Marley marked each window. Snow dried to grit. The bell wire squeaked. Mid-afternoon, a voice cut. 2 cyclists on the county road close to the marker rock. I told them to stop there, hands visible. We kept the gate dark and watched from the window. 2 bikes leaned on the rock, frames white with rime. State your names, I said. They gave one each. How long together? Any contact, any cuts? 2 days, no contact, no blood. Sarah asked if I wanted the box. I nodded, told her to slide stew in a jug and step back. Marley wrote what we sent. We did not open the gate. They ate slow, like the road had taken more than they planned. Then a new voice used the window, tuned to our tone. It said the cyclists were safe. Friends from the west asked us to take them in and promised fuel. The timing was neat in a way radio rarely is. I turned volume down and listened to cadence. Lena said wait 10 minutes and I said we would. The cyclists finished, set bowls on the snow and waved. They asked for shelter. I said quarantine only, 3 days, rules on the pain. They looked at each other like the answer was known. One nodded, the other glanced south. Sarah said the south path was empty and I told her to hold the door and count to 30. The road bell rang once, not a footfall but a tug. Both cyclists turned toward the sound with a reflex that didn't match their story. Hold the rock, I said. They held for 5 seconds, then drifted a step. A truck nosed out of the birch and stopped. The passenger door cracked and shut. No one got out. The cyclists waved and spoke a name I didn't catch. Back away from the vehicle, I said. The closer one said it was fine, said he just needed to help his friend. He took a step. The bell answered with a flat tone. Stay at the rock, I said. If your friend needs aid, he must speak and follow steps. The truck stayed quiet. A shape shifted behind the windshield, slow and wrong. Lena said we should not play savior, and I said that was the rule, not a mood. The passenger door opened wider. A man slid down and stood with his hands loose. He turned toward my voice. His mouth worked, not for words. He stepped, found the lower line, and the bell sang once. He did not flinch. The cyclists flinched for him. We can't take you in, I said. The closer cyclist said it would be quick, said he could sit by the shed and warm and then decide. I told him rules do not bend for emergencies because emergencies are why they exist. Marley wrote the sentence in the margin. For a minute, no one moved. Snow ticked on the frames. The man swayed. The cyclist gave up first. One backed to the truck, engine already running. The other put his hand on the door as if he could turn the night by will. Leave now, I said. Lena said, keep it simple. I said, leave now again. The engine note rose. The truck dragged free. The second cyclist climbed in. The man by the bell turned toward the fading sound and then toward me again. I did not open the gate. The shotgun stayed racked and the rifle stayed cased. He took 2 steps, slowed by drift and chose no direction. Wind moved him back. We held position. After a minute, he shuffled along the fence until the drift took his legs. He sank to the knee and stayed there, moving a little, then less. I watched until his head dropped and the body stopped trying to rise. The bell line hung slack. Cleanup waits for light when cold stiffens gloves. I wrote the time and the count, then the line I used to keep the story from changing later. Gates stayed closed, voices tried the easy way, rules held. Lena set a card, no broadcast next window. I cut the loop short. The secret took root that night. Marley left a parcel by the marker during the late check, a bag with biscuits and a note that said, keep moving north, cash ahead under the culvert marker. She told no one because nothing bad happened. Morning, I found the bag gone and the snow scuffed by boots I didn't know. We keep gifts inside the fence, I said. She said she was sorry. I told her she wasn't wrong to want the world simpler than it is, but we would not make the same mistake twice. She wrote herself a rule. No gifts, no night errands, no notes at the road. Snow thickened and muted edges, the cyclists never called back, and the truck's track filled with powder. The beacon stayed low, windows stayed short. I watched the tree line and left a hook. If the bell rang a third time that night, we would move. It didn't. The night held. Cold settled hard and never lifted at noon. Trees wore crystal and the bell wire sang a thin note when wind touched it. Beacon windows stayed short, the stove low, and steps outside slowed to save breath. We moved like the cold was a rule that respected patience and punished rush. Work followed that rule. I raked the eaves where ice pinned gutters. Lena checked hands and feet for numb patches. Marley counted matches. Gus walked the line with his stick and circled the south corner where drift pressed the mesh. Sarah said the shed heater ticked wrong and I asked her to kill it, crack the vent and bring the spare. By late afternoon, the sky went iron gray and sound traveled flat. I brushed frost from the pass-through lid. The fence hummed, the bell line hung true. The day looked ready to end early. At dark, a new sound found us. A fast rattle rose, fell, then returned with weight like spokes clicking under load. The note climbed the drive and stopped at the road bell with a soft bump. I kept the room dark. 2 snowmobiles idled in the cut, lights low. Riders wore helmets frosted at the seals. "Stay on the machines and keep visors down," I said, and the lead rider nodded. Lena watched their hands through the pane. I slid a laminated card through the slot at the rock with a grease pencil tied on. Names, how long together, any contact, any blood. Block letters came back. Alex and June, 2 weeks together, clean, seeking fuel in a warm corner, paid with work. I told them rules don't change for engines. Quarantine first, food through the box, water sealed, no entry until we can promise the house we are safe. Helmets dipped. Sarah said the shed was clear and I asked her to set cots, blankets, and the spare heater with the alarm in view. We kept the gate closed and walked the steps out loud. "Park at the marker, engines off, keys on seats, gear into the bin with tongs, step back," I said, and June gave a thumbs up. They rolled to the rock, cut motors, and swung a leg slow like people who had ridden long and cold. Heat went to their hands first. I slid stew, then a jug, then a towel to wipe the seal. Alex held the bowl with both gloves and didn't fog the visor more than he had to. "Sleep now, talk at dawn," I said, and June tapped the glass twice. The shed light went low. Snow began again, fine and steady, and the bell stayed still. I walked the tape at knee height, checked the wedge at the gate, and put the shotgun back where it lives. Lena wrote their names on the board with an arrow to the shed, and Marley watched the timer on the heater. Gus watched the trees from upstairs. Dawn found clarity. Frost mapped every screw on the rail. I took the thermometer and a tray to the shed and spoke plain. "We'll take temps and check for cuts. Then tea and a plan," I said, and Alex answered through the visor that they were ready to work. June showed unbroken skin and a few brush scratches, clean and dry. They passed the checks. 3 days still held because rules hold when luck doesn't. June said rules felt like shelter, and I said they were. We assigned small jobs behind glass. June listed sled repairs she could guide from the window. Alex counted tools we could loan and wrote a plan to move fuel without wasting heat. By noon, they were inside the work, if not the house. Alex talked engines without showing off. June watched how wind carved the drifts and pointed at a line where the fence would need attention by nightfall. I told them the bell tone matters and to say if it changes. The second night ran clean. No bells, no sway at the fence. The radio carried a short from Houghton about a plow stuck at a bridge and a nurse asking for powdered milk. We passed it along and logged it because even when we can't fix a thing, the net holds edges together for a while. We cleared them at dusk on day 3. The shed door opened, helmets came off, and faces showed color again. We kept distance in the house and handed them lights and a card with signals and rules. June took the loft and lined her gloves on a cord above the stove. Alex found the hum at the south post and tapped the brace until it steadied. Marley showed them the pantry and Gus pointed out the corner where the fence always drifts too high. By late evening, the place felt more like a crew than a shelter. We ate simple and wrote tomorrow in small lines. Clear the north gap, brush the stovepipe, check the sleds, short beacon windows. The cold pressed on the panes, but work warmed the rooms. I ended the page with the line I use when it fits. More hands, same rules, better odds. We slept lighter. Wind shifted east and laid a skin of ice over everything. The beacon cut out mid-word, came back as a breath and died. Meter dropped, loop went flat, and the ridge stepped away from the world. I wrote the time and circled it. When the tower goes quiet, you lose more than sound. You lose how strangers place you on their maps. Snow hissed at the windows. I tried the low antenna and heard only a tired hiss. June said Glaze would build by morning, and I asked her to save talk for daylight. We set the list for dawn: tower, fence, stove, water. Alex pulled a coil. Gus tied a rope. Marley taped a card. Tower out, noon window at risk. By first light, the world was glass. Branches wore sleeves. The tower stood straight, rungs striped with ice. At the base, the cable had split at a bend. Kill the breaker and we do this once, I said. June nodded, counted back from 10, and peeled old tape from the joint. We didn't climb far. Gloves could reach if we leaned and let the rope take weight. June cracked the jacket, cleaned the braid, and eased the split open with a pocket blade. Cut clean, new connector, no bear, I said. She taped the bend long. Alex watched the sky. The frame hummed. I kept to the brace and didn't rush. June slid the connector on, tightened until her glove creaked, and wrapped the joint. A heater pack warmed the tape. We moved the run a finger's width, taped the spot, and filed a note for thaw. We tested each rung and kept the rope. At the base, I threw the breaker. The loop returned. Cabin north, half-hour, quarantine required. We let it play once, then dropped power. The tower was back, but only just. We warmed slow. I wrote the fix in the log. Then the radio found us with a voice that came in steady and cold. A woman sat north on a small ridge with 2 children and watched a line form in the flats. Not a crowd. Her word was column, a long strand, stretching until brush or wire slowed the front, then snapping tight again. She didn't ask for the gate. Give me a bearing and a landmark, I said. She gave degrees and named a cut rock hunters used to shed packs. The numbers laid a pencil path from the marsh to the service road below our hill. If the line held the easy grade, it would hit the slide we built in summer and either pool or try to climb. Alex traced a finger toward our gate and didn't finish the line. She refused rescue. She said she had put extra beans and rice in a culvert north of her and marked it with a stack of rocks for whoever followed. Then she stopped. We set small plans. Truck faced downhill. Totes packed with water, food, blankets, and the radio that works when the big one doesn't. Tools moved to the door. We greased the gate wedge so a boot finds it without looking. Marley taped 2 cards to the wall, count calmly, and cut lights if told. Gus walked the fence and knocked frost from the bell so it would speak when asked. The beacon window stayed short. I called the relay with fewer words. Tower repaired, power low, column reported north, shaping movement if needed. Houghton answered, received. Afternoon held flat light. The woman checked in once more. The front of the column touched alder, slowed, and the rear piled until it pushed the front through. Heads turned unevenly, some toward wires, some to open ground, some to nothing. She asked if it helped. It does, I said, and I asked her to hold one more window in case we lost ours. She agreed. We kept quiet. Lights stayed off. Beacon stayed short. Alex checked the generator. June tied the crawl tape where it had sagged. Lena set gloves and masks where hands could find them. I chalked a line from bunks to the cellar hatch. By dawn, the line existed in more than words. Far out where the road sinks into fields, motion ignored ditches. Not fast, not directed, just forward. It met the old service road and changed speed like water in a channel. First bodies stepped into the dip and slowed. Others pressed. I kept the count plain. Pressure rising, I said. Left edge thinning, I said. No breach. Lena counted masks. Marley folded blankets. Gus set the bar and tapped the wedge into place. The slide held the first push. Snow-fused dirt and rock shrugged the lead sideways. Those behind pressed and then peeled into birch where brush tied ankles. Sound dragged. We watched the false gap that leads to open ground. 2 strays found it and sank to the knee. The woman came back without asking for space. "Rear thinning," she said. "Marsh pulling what doesn't like brush." Her voice carried too little sleep. I thanked her and asked for a cleaner landmark on the cache. "Third drainage north of the split pine, rock stack on the uphill lip," she said, and signed off. Afternoon followed. The column gave up on the easy road and stopped arguing with the slide. Groups sheared off into trees and went quiet in snow. We stayed at posts and let time work. The bell rang once when a stray met the lower line. The tone was flat and final. No hands took hold. When stillness became more than a pause, I wrote the times and called the net. Cabin north, column past the lower road, slide holding, movement now low into the birch. No assistance requested, no travelers taken. Cache north reported by unknown woman. Will relay June folded the map and traced the power line. Alex called it breath leaving a room that had been full too long. Gus leaned his stick on the rail and smiled. We reset the house and ate in quiet. Marley asked if we would leave something back when we took from the culvert, and I said yes when we could spare it. Lena said rules feel kinder when they include return, and I agreed. The beacon returned to the normal window. Location broad, status stable, quarantine required. Night came quiet. I checked the tower from the yard and made a note to change that bend when thaw lets hands do it. Ice hung on the rungs. The fence hummed only when wind asked. Bells stayed silent. I ended the page with one line. We shaped the path and it chose not to argue. Before dusk, we walked the yard with fresh eyes. June tightened the brace at the south post. Alex packed a tote with spare gloves and lamps, and Marley marked the crawl tape with 2 knots where turns confuse you in the dark. I asked Lena to set a card by each door that said, "Wait, listen." We practiced a quiet move from bunks to posts with boots in hand, then did it again slower. Practice beats courage when noise punishes mistakes. We treated the next day like a test we knew was coming. The column had thinned, but snow keeps yesterday's shape longer than people do, and tracks showed more feet trying the service road in the night. I walked the fence with Gus and looked for places where weight might find an easy line. He tapped the south post and said the brace would hold, and I asked him to set a second wedge because wedges buy time and time buys choices. We did not fortify louder, we fortified smarter. June cut a shallow V in the drift to steer strays toward open ground and away from the mesh. Alex packed snow into blocks and set a low berm beside the marker rock so anyone following a clean path would stop where the light can read them. Marley marked the crawl tape with one more knot where panic turns right when left is safer, and I told her to keep the pattern simple. 1 knot turn, 2 knots hold. Inside, we ran a dark sweep. Lamps took red covers, reflective tags went under tape, and the window over the sink got cardboard. Lena moved the kit under the stairs and asked about a second pair of gloves at each door, and I nodded because cold makes clumsy. We rehearsed the quiet drill without talking. Shoes in hand, 3 steps to the corner, count to 10, then posts. Sarah took the west window and kept the stove low, and I asked her to kill the kettle before the hour. Gus showed where the floor bites if you don't step wide. We ran it again slower and wrote what snagged us. The beacon dropped to a whisper. Cabin north, status stable, column dispersed, I said, then asked Houghton to relay we were off at night unless a distress came with a landmark. The answer came back clean. Afternoon turned thin and gray. I checked the slide with binoculars and watched 3 bodies stir at the base, try the slope and give up when the crust broke. We did not test them back. Marley set 2 hot water bottles in the loft so hands would work if we called for rope. At dusk, we leaned into routine. June brushed ice from the bell. Alex bled air from the generator line and left it ready. Lena wrapped Gus's knee. I wrote the weather and left a blank because blanks mean you're waiting on something real. We ate simple and set the night in short sentences. No visitors, no lights. If the bell rings once, hold, twice, move. 3, backtrack and reset. Sarah said the wind would shift north by midnight, and I asked everyone to listen for how a north wind changes the wire's voice. Close to 10, the road bell kissed the chime and went still. I watched snow lift and fall on the lower spur like a rabbit wanting to be somewhere else. No shapes followed. Midnight brought the wind change Sarah predicted. The wire dropped a note and the house learned a new quiet. We let it teach us. I said we would keep the beacon off and hold the drill as is, and Lena set the kit by the stairs. Marley whispered the crawl tape felt different in the dark, and I told her to trust it anyway. The night passed without a push. At 4, the bell rang once and then nothing, snow giving up a branch it had held too long. I finished the page with 6 small words: systems held, discipline held, sleep resumed tonight, all accounted. Wind slid north and put a fresh edge on the fence. The wire dropped a note, the bell line twitched, and snow made the yard look shallow when it wasn't. We ate early, killed lights, and set the wedge with a boot. Marley taped a card by the cellar. Wait, listen, count to 10, move. I watched the service road from upstairs. Far off, 2 shapes drifted and lost the line, then found it again. Sarah said the wind would carry sound farther, and I told her to listen for a second bell. The first bell kissed the chime and stopped. 5 minutes later, it came back flat and too long. Strays had found the lower wire. I stood behind the door with the shotgun near and the rifle cased. June pressed a hand to the pane and watched the dark. Hold posts, no voices, I said. Lena said she was on the stairs with the kit. Gus tapped the floor and said the south post sounded angry. The bell rang again, then scraped. Pressure builds the way water finds gaps. The first bodies leaned into mesh without aim, and those behind pushed them forward until the line pushed back. Our fence bends and guides. Tonight it bent and sang like a saw. I timed the bells. 10 seconds between first and second, then 6, then 3. Rate rising, I said. Marley said blankets sat at the hatch and the log was open. The floor passed the sound to my shoes. We do not hold a porch when the line takes weight. We become the house. Inside, cellar now, I said. Sarah killed the lamp. June slid the bar. Lena checked Gus's knee, and we moved as drilled, shoes in hand, 2 fingers on the wall, 3 steps to the hatch. The generator hum rose through wood. We dropped one by one. I barred the hatch and let the house above go dark. The room smelled like warm oil and dry pine. Marley counted heads. 5, paused, corrected 5. Hold quiet, I said. Lena read the air and wrote the number on her wrist. Feet scraped above, the bar groaned, and something heavy slid down mesh and tugged the bell. I kept the watch clock in my palm and wrote times. Writing makes fear stand in a smaller room. Alex said the line would tire them if we starved it of sound. June pointed at the breaker list. I shook my head. Too late to change the night. We shared the hatch crack for air and news. No breach, just wait, I said after the first look. Lena said the air still read safe. Marley passed water 1 cup at a time. Gus loosened his shoulders on purpose. The bells changed first. The tone shortened and the interval stretched. Rate falling, I said. Sarah said the wire had stopped singing. We waited for 3 more measures to make the pattern hold. Above us, shuffling thinned, then drift took footsteps and smeared them to noise. A last tug dragged the bell and let it go. A second touch rasped and fell away. Then only snow moved against wood. I let a minute pass and opened the hatch a hand. Cold climbed the steps and told the truth. Posts by order, I said. June took west, Sarah east, and I climbed to the door and checked the latch with 2 fingers. The porch showed scuff where boots had never stood. The fence sagged an inch and held. The marker rock wore a cap of snow. We brought the house up 1 lamp at a time. Lena read the air and nodded. Gus stood. The stick knocked once. He laughed. Marley wrote the times in the log and added the mistake that wasn't one. Counted 6 when 5 stood. Cleanup would wait for morning. We drank warm water that tasted like metal. I ended the page with the line that tells me how to walk the next day. The plan held because we did. Then I closed the log and let the house be a house again. Morning came clean and the yard told a quiet story. The fence bowed an inch and kept shape, the bell line hung straight and the gate wedge still bit. We checked hands and walked the perimeter. Snow held prints where the infected had leaned, then wind pressed them flat again. I took Alex, June, and Marley to the culvert north of the split pine. We counted turns and stopped when the rock stack showed. The drift hit a shallow hollow. We dug and found a sealed bin, rice, beans, a small note that said, "For whoever still stands." We took half and closed it clean. I left flour and tea and Marley added a pencil and card with a grid for dates. "Write the trade," I said, and she nodded, printed neat, and tucked the card under the lid. June reset the rocks so they'd read from road. Alex brushed our tracks from the shoulder. Back home, we patched the fence, lifted the wire a finger, and checked the crawl tape where night feet miss. Lena cleaned the kit and logged what we used. Gus walked to the south post and tapped it twice, the sound back to normal. Days stretched. Still winter, but brighter. The beacon kept 2 windows, short and useful. We passed weather, road shape, and the marker for the culvert. No promises, just data and rules that keep people from breaking the place that shelters them. I end with the line I write when the page is empty and the house is not. We hope for calm and plan for collapse. We keep the gate closed until trust has time to breathe. If you can hear this, approach early, speak first, and carry your share. The rules are the bridge we use to cross the night. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. See you in the next one.